Welcome back to Teacher Talk. My name is Lisa Bayless. I'm a school teacher and counselor. I've been in education for over 20 years. I'm the author of the book Self-Compassion for Educators. And now I love to share and connect with so many of you. And these Teacher Talks started as an opportunity to grow and connect with other people. And I'm so excited that they continue to be a part of our everyday weekly conversations. And today I'm really thrilled. We're going to invite in Sarah to talk with us. So these talks are about inviting educators who are doing the work, who are showing up to share their stories and to be a part of our letting Sarah in here now. Sarah's going to join us and she's going to tell us a little bit about her adventure in education towards wellness. Sarah, you're there. Hi. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So welcome. Thank you for making a bit of time on your Thursday. I so appreciate you coming in and talking to me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy week, but I'm taking some time because this is so important and I love your work. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Well, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in education, your role right now, and a little bit more about you?
Sure. Lisa, both of you and I believe in mindfulness in education and SEL. So I'll start there that I have loved reading your book because it gives so many great accessible techniques for teachers to really invest in their wellness. It's a really important book. I've been in teaching for over 20 years. You know, when you're in teaching a long time, you start to forget how many years, but a career teacher, both classroom and a learning support teacher in Toronto, Ontario, in Chicago, Illinois, and now in BC. And I've also been involved in post-secondary. So I am working for Queen's part-time. And I recently wrote the newest version of their social emotional learning course. That's an additional qualification for teachers. I'm going to be starting to teach my course next week on Monday. And I just am really proud of that work and excited to see the feedback and to see what the teachers have to say about that course, because I think that it's going to give them a lot of wonderful strategies. What else? I'm an inclusive education facilitator now. So I'm at the district level and I push into many different classrooms and I co-teach and co-plan with different teachers. And I basically help those students with diverse abilities to make sure that they have access points, to make sure that they are a part of the classroom community. And I know that teachers are teaching, you know, the diversity of our classrooms has expanded and seems to be ever expanding. So I've been in teaching for so long, I learned a very different way. We did have segregation in the sense that there were self-contained classrooms and I didn't work with a lot of students when I was growing up that had different abilities. And I think that's not how the real world is, and we don't want our real world to look like that with segregation. So I'm a huge inclusion advocate.
Oh, you have so many amazing things on and so many offerings to educators to support them in our world. So first of all, thank you for the hard work you've done for 20 years in education. I know that journey. I've been on it too. And for continuing to know what's important to you and for advocating for not only the kids, but for the educators. You know, in our conversations that you and I've been having, I learned more about this passion of you from about supporting educators, especially in that inclusive ed lens. You know, I was really excited to hear that from you because I think it's so important. And we talked a lot about in our initial conversations around, you know, how burnt out and how tired, especially inclusive ed teachers are feeling these days. And, you know, I really want to, so I'm always interested in finding little pockets of people. And when you and I started talking, I thought, well, this is so important. I have some dear friends who are inclusive ed teachers and I know how hard they work. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what you're seeing in this journey towards inclusive education and what more you would like to see?
So I would like to clone my role and do a lot more co-teaching, and I would like more teachers to be able to feel that they have someone to push in for not just a few minutes per week, but someone with a special ed background to really help out on a more regular basis. Because if we're going to move full on inclusive ed, students of all different abilities, which I love, and diverse groups in one classroom, sometimes the teachers feel like they really need to call a lifeline. They need to have that safety net of people, specialists to help out. And they also need to feel comfortable with having someone in their room. So part of my job is to make sure that people know I'm not judging their practice. And I have been a classroom teacher, and I still, as soon as I take over and teach a class, I'm still going to have behaviors pop up from students and be dealing with those. So it's interesting that in my role, sometimes people feel nervous to have me into their classroom because they feel like they have to be on display. But I never want people to feel that way. And I think when people get to know me and I work with them, and there's 6 different ways that we can co-teach in a classroom together, when they experience that, they realize that this is where it's at, that they have a lifeline. But I also think admin can be that co-teaching model. I think that we have wonderful educational assistants, and so training for them to really be hands-on and help roll out. Their job is not to teach the curriculum, but help to roll out the curriculum and care for our students. So I feel like there just has to be a really strong network of people. It takes a village to make inclusive education work. And that's unfortunately where the burnout comes, when we don't have the staff available. And right now, as you know, across BC, we are in a teacher and EA shortage. And I'm in a school district that is closer to downtown Vancouver, so we don't feel it as much as the smaller districts or out there further out in the northern communities. And it's really at a breaking point for the teachers that do show up, because then we're taking on more with less people to help out.
Let's just pause right there, because I think that's such an important and just notice whether you're an inclusive ed teacher or not right now, and not just in BC, because I know we have people from across Canada and across North America and, well, really around the world. We're seeing educators feeling overwhelmed, feeling tired, and the ones that are continuing to show up are feeling like they have to take on more, which is also a lot of stress. And our communities have had a shortage of teachers, and some of that is because educators are finally saying, like, listen, I need a break and I need to pause because this is not okay. So we're seeing how some stepping back, and then we're seeing those people who are saying, yes, but I still need to show up and do this work, or feeling tired and overwhelmed. And there's such a challenge in our system right now. And I see that. And I love your passion of wanting to go in and co-teach and clone yourself, that, like, there's such a beauty in that. And yet, I don't think we have the technology to clone you yet and to bring all of what you offer into our schools. And because we're not there yet, what can we do? Like, well, you're seeing this burnout, especially in the inclusive ed. What do you think some of these teachers could use if they don't get someone like Sarah, who's so amazing and has this background of social emotional learning and mindfulness, and can, bring different ways of co-teaching into their schools? Most, like you said, even most districts don't have someone like you supporting them.
Yeah.
So what can a classroom teacher do at this time? What do you think is some of the foundations to supporting not only the kids, but also themselves?
Right. Okay, personal wellness, as both you and I know, and investing in our wellness and working that into your daily teaching. So if you are not someone that has the training in mindfulness or breath work, you can always put up on the big screens that are now in every classroom an app. I love calm.com because it has all the meditations. It brings you through the breath work. And as a whole class, no matter what the age is, adults can do this breath work, this mindfulness. Young little kids, it has great videos for children. So I would put that up on your screen, and I would do that with my students at certain times of the day, especially elementary, middle, and even in high school. It's so funny how high school teachers believe that they are so content driven and they just need to get the content out. But those kids right now, we're all living through a global pandemic. We're living through times that we never even imagined could exist. So working mindfulness or working those wellness breaks, maybe it's a physical wellness break, into your classes at all levels, even in high school when you feel like you are a math teacher. I've seen lots of math teachers start with connection, start with a mindfulness break before they even get into the content, because when people are regulated, when their systems are regulated or calmer, then they're going to absorb more of the content anyways. So I would work that in. I would also, for districts, I would do more trauma-informed training for all staff, because as you and I know, there's many students that have dealt with trauma or are dealing with trauma. I think the percentage right now is at least 25% of our students would have experienced some pretty significant trauma. And plus, living through a global pandemic, we're all experiencing it, right?
Yeah.
And so trauma-informed practices need to be like rolled out consistently at staff meetings and wellness check-ins. I think that admin are exhausted too. So I feel like having time together as a staff to bond through wellness practices and learning those I love breath work, part of mindfulness, part of yoga. So I think learning all of those strategies and practicing them together as a staff will bring cohesion and keep people wanting to come back day after day. But finding the time to work it into your curriculum
I love
is
it. So,
important.
so much I want to unpack there, and I want to just rewind a little bit. And a couple things. I love how you brought in the Calm app. Another one of my favorites is Insight Timer. You know, and as a mindfulness educator, as someone who teaches educators how to teach mindfulness, you know, throwing that up in your classroom and then not practicing with your students isn't necessarily the greatest way to do it. So I'm a big believer that if you want to embody and learn and understand more about mindfulness breath work, calming your nervous system, it really put those practices up for you, figure out what you need in this moment, and then your students will follow. So just that recognition, because I think as you were talking about regulation, we too need to be regulated. So this really important practice of yes, this is hard, yes, it's stress, but what's, you know, do we notice when we're stressed or overwhelmed, and how do we find ways to calm our body, to come back into feeling in our body, our breath, listening to the sounds, finding ways to anchor back in. So I think that mindfulness component, again, I'm a big believer in awareness and personal awareness and self-inquiry. So thank you for bringing that in. And I think you're totally right. The other place that's lovely is to do it in community. So to do it with your staff at a staff meeting, or to have things set up so that you can connect with each other. The one thing I will say is that, you know, we all are on our different journeys, and we can't all expect the same people to show up in the same way at the same time. So finding your own authentic grounding practice, place of presence, you know, what is it that keeps you well? I love how you said, you know, do a movement break, or, you know, listen to a mindfulness practice, or perhaps do a gratitude practice. So there's different ways of connecting to positive emotion that we can bring our authentic selves. And I think too often we're trying to emulate someone else, and we're not bringing in our most authentic selves, and kids know that, right?
Right.
So if we want our kids to be regulated, it starts with us being regulated, and we can't try and do someone else's thing. We have to do our own. So discovering that is amazing.
Right.
So,
Totally.
and then I want to unpack this trauma informed. My goodness, it's one of my favorite things to talk about too. And I love to bring it from a compassionate stance, you know, but you're right. So many of us, if we haven't experienced trauma, we are living in a low grade stress response. We know our nervous systems right now are really struggling. So can you tell us a little bit more of your background in this? You know, you believe in trauma informed schools. Tell me more what this looks like. How do you show it, share it, and bring it into the work that you do?
Okay, well, I just finished leading a book club for learning support staff, and we talked about Kids These Days by Jody Carrington, Canadian doctor who goes into schools and helps educate all staff on how to have a trauma-informed practice. And the number one thing that Jody Carrington talks about is connection. If a student who is in trauma or has experienced trauma shows up to the school and really feels consistently that they have a number of people, hopefully a number of people, but at least one adult in the school that they can check in with, that really is listening to them, that has unconditional love. Because kids that are going through trauma, you know, they can be the tricky kids. They can be having that response with their body heightened, that is anxiety, that is shut down at times. They can have their heads on the desk. They can be having big behaviors. They can be at flight risks, trying to escape the classroom and the school because they're just not regulated, and they're in a really high sense of anxiety. So again, doing the SEL work and connecting the student, instead of thinking that you're going to get the same growth academically, I think we have to think about the safety needs and the hierarchy of needs. And when a student feels safe in an environment and they can start to heal and they can start to learn. So again, trauma-informed practices should be brought to whole staffs, like I said, but it takes flexibility, because when I grew up and I went through the school system, you know, we didn't even have kids that were having those big behaviors in our classes. Like, they were sent off somewhere or suspended for a week at a time, or sent to different schools. I mean, I had, it was sad, but we didn't see those behaviors. But guess what? Those kids didn't get an education. So I think that having a flexible mindset, because people want consequences, and I agree that you should still hold students accountable for
Yeah.
the behaviors, but we hold them accountable in a different way. For instance, Chicago, where I worked for quite a while, we have meditation and mindfulness rooms there instead of out of school suspension. So literally, we have very trained people in those types of spaces doing in school, and it's not suspension. It is an SEL mindfulness meditation. How do we calm and regulate ourselves program, instead of sending them home to the unsafe places where probably, not probably, but sometimes the trauma is being inflicted, right, from that environment. Trauma, this is what happens though, and I've worked in these schools. Depending on neighborhoods, there can be a lot more trauma in certain schools, because we know that socioeconomics affects people, and we know that people moving from other countries that are war-torn affects people. So what we see in those schools is a higher burnout. And
Yeah.
so those schools should be staffed, and I really believe this, and this is back to some money. So we need
Mhm.
to advocate, but also community members need to advocate, because it's always the teacher saying, we need more money, we need more training, we need more time. But I think communities need to advocate for public education, because
Yeah.
as we see what's happening in Ontario right now, I'm from Toronto, I know that money is not there, which means staff are not there, trainings are not there, and the students are not benefiting from trauma-informed practices just because
Oh,
they don't have the staff, the training, etc. So all of those things need to come together. But what can we do without, if we can't control some of that stuff right now, we can
mhm.
care, we can get to know our students on a whole basic, holistic viewpoint. Culturally, we have to embrace all different cultures coming into our room and make sure that everybody is seen and feels heard and loved. That's the number one thing. And guess what? You are going to have behaviors with kids that are in trauma, and you're going to have to forgive and start anew, start fresh every day, and keep that really neutral. It's hard because in your heart you're like, this kid just told me to F off. I don't feel neutral in my heart. But
Yeah.
you have to keep that neutral and then call your lifeline.
Yeah.
And I think you and I are going to talk about co-regulating, and this would be the next step to trauma informed. Do you want me to start talking about
Right.
co-regulating?
Your breath. I just hear so much amazing coming out of you, and I just want to reflect a little bit, because I'm a big believer that everyone wants to be seen, valued, and heard. And I think this is the basis to Jody's work. Dr. Jody Carrington's is like, are we lighting up for kids? Is what she loves to talk about, right? And and I like to think like, and who's lighting up for us? Is someone in the building also saying, I see you as an educator? Is this happening too? And the big piece around creating safe environments is also staying safe within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Two things came up for me again. One thing is, that practice of regulating ourselves is so important. And I love that we're going to go into that, because we need to stay calm so that we can meet their chaos, right? There's that lovely awareness of just being in ourselves. But also from a place of my own experience in my school, we also had what we called a calming room. And so kids who were dysregulated when they knew it, they were feeling lots of anxiety, stress, they wanted to run away from the school, they were feeling overly emotional, they needed to connect with a friend or a counselor, or they needed to just find a quiet space to recognize that they needed to calm their system. We had a space where they could come, and it was just a quiet room. They could have, they could color, they could meditate. There was yoga mats in there. There were some cushions, and it was a space where they could find, and we would check in as counselors. That was part of my job. Let's take 20 minutes, just see what you need to do to calm your nervous system. What does that look like, and how does that feel? Getting kids to practice that on their own, like, what an amazing gift for them to be like, my nervous system's up here. I need to regulate it. I have a space now that I can do that, safe to do that. So our overall goal is to get kids back in class, to get them learning, right? We want them to learn the content, but connection's so much more important. Connection over content every time, connection over curriculum. And the only way we can learn is if we are safe. In fact, it's it.
Totally.
Like, our brain does not learn if we are not safe. And what we know about, just like physiologically, our stress response is creating a place where we can't actually learn if we are stressed and overwhelmed. And so, creating an environment, a foundational space where you feel safe as an educator, and then can create a safe space for the learners around you, is sort of a huge foundation of creating a trauma-informed space. And then I like to come from that compassionate lens too, right? So as educators, we're really good at giving this compassionate care outward. But when it becomes the point where, you know, a kid throws an F-bomb at you and you're like, yeah, and I've been there, right? And you're like, you just feel like you're vibrating and you're ready to explode too. How are you approaching your own self with some compassion? How are you meeting those challenging moments and diffusing your own system so that you can stay present? Because this is just it. The kids' jobs are to push our buttons, right? It's their jobs to dysregulate and learn to regulate. Hopefully our brains are on enough that we know how to become dysregulated and regulate ourselves so we can start to show that. Let's go there, because that's kind of what co-regulation is about. Tell me a little bit more about, you know, your experience in working with either educators or kids around co-regulation.
Okay, so co-regulation, think about when your own child has an accident, falls down, is really crying and very upset about it, what you do to co-regulate. You know, I'm here for you. I know it hurts. They're being seen, they're being heard, and then let's breathe together, or let's get some, you know, Band-Aid, let's give it a kiss, whatever that you do. You have all these strategies to co-regulate with perhaps your own kid. So you're using those with both students in your class and then also fellow staff members, because we can co-regulate with the other staff in our school. And actually, this is super important to reach out to a staff and know that you have a lifeline to reach out to. I've definitely had my people that I know I can go to on lunch or whatever, and we go for a walk. Typically for me, it's getting out of the school building when I'm already feeling myself at that bubbling point, because it's been a difficult day and you know, there's been things that I had to deal with. Because
we just pause. That's normal in education. And it doesn't mean you're a bad teacher if you need to go for a walk at lunch. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean like you're getting something wrong if at lunch you are had enough of this job and you're tired. But I just really want to stress this, that this is means you're human, and it's messy and it's hard. And I love the line of like, find your lifeline, find somebody who you can diffuse whatever's going on for you. So sorry
totally.
to
Yeah. And this is important about, I have to say about staff rooms. Here's what's happened. You're already heightened. You go in the staff room. Other people might be having a hard day too, and you're hearing all of that energy and you're hearing the stories. Is that helping you come down for your afternoon or not? Me personally, no. And I think, you know, it's been, studies have been shown that yes, venting is important. We all have to talk about what happened, but also what are the strategies to bring your system back in so you can go back for the afternoon. And again, it's interesting because kids go out and they have recess when they're young. They run, they play, they get things out of their system so that they can start fresh. Sometimes at recess it heightens them, but a lot of the time they get things out of their system. So I believe in going outside in nature. I'm a big believer in mindful looking, mindful seeing, and awe, experiencing awe and the beauty of nature, doing my breathing as I walk. I'm a big believer in mindful walking. So I would do that probably maybe even by myself sometimes, because sometimes you just need to bring yourself back down. And if you talk about what just happened, it can keep you in that heightened state. Co-regulating of students. So here's the deal. The teacher needs to be the one to co-regulate the classroom teacher. And this, unfortunately, doesn't happen that often because the teacher is teaching up to 30 kids, sometimes more. So what we had in the trauma-informed schools that I've been working at, amazing idea where you call someone who is a non-enrolling person that can come, and maybe you have 2-3 people and you're just texting them and you say, I need to co-regulate with little Johnny. So then the principal, vice principal, someone like me, anybody who's available comes and takes over the class. And, you know, it doesn't matter. They can just be doing a drawing activity, something simple. You don't have to roll out big curriculum, and watches the rest of the class. And then the classroom teacher co-regulates with that student. I care about you. Let's take a walk. Let's breathe, and brings them back into the fold. Because what happens so much is that teachers can't do that. And then the person that does co-regulate with them, whether that's a counselor, vice principal, whatever, that's who they gravitate to. That's who they're going to be with. And they're not in the classroom. So they're not experiencing an inclusive environment, because they're really with adults versus their peers.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that you're right. As educators, we are responsible for so many beings, and to know who you can call in a school and to create that culture where, you know, hey, like you said, little Johnny needs co-regulating right now. Can I have moment. And it's not always easy. It's not like people can just drop what they're doing, but at some point we want to know that we can trust their team of people who, when you call, then you've got that moment. Because the chances are, if you're co-regulating with this kid, the likelihood of them getting back into the classroom sooner and being ready to learn is so much faster than trying to get someone else to do it, or waiting a long period of time, because then we escalate. And just that reminder is, as we're doing that, making sure that we're modeling it. And I think that this is a big piece that I'm an advocate for, is that as educators, what we're doing and how we're talking and our own actions are just as powerful as, explicitly teaching things. So, recognizing and sharing. I notice that, there's a lot of energy in this classroom right now. And some of you, even before it gets to escalation, right? What could we all do together to create a calmer state? Or maybe I need a big breath right now, so I'm just going to do this. You're all welcome to join me, right? So modeling these things from an authentic place can be really, really helpful. I love that you are such a huge advocate for this, Sarah. I can see your passion and your energy, and I want to clone you. I want more of you in every district, in every school, and bringing in this foundation of social emotional learning, and mindfulness as a practice to really support our educators. We have a question. I just want to ask it. It says, how, if your staff is so stretched already, can you find someone to do this? And that's a really good question, especially in today's systems where, there isn't always that person. Do you have any ideas or insights on how you can do that in your classroom?
Okay, so I fully agree with you that in a perfect world, there'd be more staff, more funding for all of this. This is what I would do. I would have another teacher in my school, and I would have, if the admin can't do it, because I know the admin are actually being pulled in to become substitute teachers all the time right now, I would have that other teacher on call. And then if we know that a student needs to be co-regulated and you want to leave and be with them, I would ask that teacher to take both classes, which I know is super hard, but if you make sure that you tell the teacher, it's not, I'm going to try to co-regulate. If it doesn't happen within 15, 20 minutes, then you're off the hook. Like, I'm not going to leave you there for a long time with two classes. Maybe that teacher takes those two classes outside and lets them just play for a little bit, or, gives them a ball and go at it, have a soccer game. Or maybe that teacher goes in between the two classes. I know you can sort of keep an eye, like we do at lunchroom supervision, on two classes. That's sort of hard because kids always get into it as soon as you leave the class. So I think amalgamating the classes, even for that 15, 20 minutes outside, might be the thing I would do. Because like I said, we're going to lose those kids. Those kids are not going to be in the classroom if we're not co-regulating with them. So yeah. It's not a perfect answer at all, but it's the answer I can give right now.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. And having those people in your school, and it can be an EA, it can be a counselor, maybe if it's the secretary for a moment, saying, can you just sit here while I work with this? There are adults in our building, the librarian, like finding that as a team. This is a great thing to co-create as a school culture. The other thing I'll say too, on top of that is, and if there really isn't anyone in that moment, then what you do for that student is good for everyone. So this is the other thing to remember, that, not everybody might be heightened at the same time, but the practices that you can do, being like, I notice that, sometimes we get struggling and we can't maybe do it intentionally with this one being, but we can all do this together right now. I care about you. I know that things are hard right now. Some of you are struggling with this. What do we need to all do together to recognize that this is really difficult, that we're going to move through it? You're not alone. These reminders that, people, to create that sense of classroom safety. So, the follow-up question to that was, how do I get everyone on board to do this? Well, I think that's the beginning of some training around, what does it mean to have a trauma-informed lens in your school? What does it mean to create a compassionate community in our system? In BC, these are mandates right now. This is an important work. It's being done at the provincial level to create compassionate cultures, to create this work so that we are showing up for kids. It doesn't mean that it's happening in action all the time, but there's the conversation towards moving to it.
Can I interrupt 1 second? I think that if enough staff go forward and say, we as a staff want to have on our professional development day, someone come in and do this compassionate training work, do this trauma-informed practice work, then that's a start. Also, I just heard yesterday in a meeting that I was in about a whole school buying into an SEL program that's already out there. it costs a little bit of money, but schools have that money to pay for it. They're using the ruler program.
Yeah.
So if you go on CASEL, CASEL, you're going to see a list of the tried and true programs for SEL.
Yeah.
And SEL and trauma informed practices, they go like this. So, and mindfulness and education, it's all whipped in together. So pick a program. It's a curriculum. It's laid out. The whole school was doing it. Everybody had the same language. The kids understand the language. I think that's the beautiful thing, to do a whole school community-wide program, and teachers can advocate for that.
Yeah. And shared language is so important, right? And so this is a lovely way to do it, is if you can have curriculum. You know, if you can't afford curriculum, if you can't do it, then here's what I'll say: start with you. This is the foundation. So and it's not one more thing. It's not doing more. It's actually giving yourself permission to slow down, check in with yourself, ask the question, what do I need right now? Because chances are whatever I need to do to create myself in a safe and caring environment is going to support all the little beings in front of me. You know, how am I practicing? How am I showing up? Do that work around reflection, around personal awareness, because as you do that work, and I can tell you, I've trained over 300 educators in mindfulness, and they say before they even start teaching it explicitly to kids, just their own practice has shifted their classroom. So finding out your own practice, you know, whatever it is that's going to help you move from here to here, finding that is the beginning of the practice. And if that's where you start, and maybe 2 or 3 of you get together, find a community, continue to share and regulate your own being, it will make a difference in how we show up for our kids. And this work is hard. There is a lot of challenges. There is a lot of diverse needs. And we are trying to create a community, as you were saying, a diverse and inclusive community. And we need to be able to hold ourselves in all of this. Sarah, last words. You're amazing. I'm so excited for this conversation, and I know it's going to really resonate with educators. And this is why these talks are here, is to hear what people are doing out there, to learn a little bit more, to know that they're not alone, and to recognize that they too have the practices and skills that they can do this work. If people want to reach you or want to follow up, how can they do that? Or last moments of words of advice?
Yeah, I post a more so about trauma informed and SEL on Twitter. I know about Twitter right now, what's happening, but so S Campbell, CAMPBELL 888 is my Twitter handle, and then Mindfulwellness360 right here on Instagram. But I'm doing some more training in my school district, and then for mindfulness, trauma informed, and then of course you and I might be presenting at the exact same conference in January. So yeah, follow me for tips and reach out to me, because I also do the mindfulness training. But I just have to say, keep on keeping on, because we got into this career for a reason. We are heart-centered. We love those kids. We're making a huge difference in people's lives. And we get these letters and these emails from students that are like now 30 years old, at least with my age, I do. And it's just so spectacular to know that I was the person that could be their safety net in school. So keep on keeping on.
Yeah. Yeah. Love them, love yourself, and do this work. I have one last question for you, and I didn't give you any more. But one of the things that I love to do for my own personal well-being outside of school, and sometimes actually I've done it in the classroom, is dance parties, because I know that movement is really good to decrease stress. And usually by the end of the day, when I'm making dinner for my family and kids, I need to throw on some tunes and I need to move my body. So I love to promote kitchen dance parties. If you were to pick one song to dance your heart out to get out of all your energy, what would your song be?
I love to dance too. I was a dance major in university. That's why I love movement so much. But okay, I'm gonna go back in the day to my university days. Video Killed the Radio Star.
So good. Love it. By the Bangles, right?
Yeah,
Video
yeah.
Killed the Radio Star. Okay,
Yeah.
that's going to be on my playlist this week. I'm definitely going to share it too. Thank you for spending some time with me, Sarah. Thanks to all of you who continue to listen, to show up. Share your feedback below. We want to continue to hear about it. Stay tuned next week. I have a really amazing guest who's going to talk about writing and Soji. And I have a bonus guest on Monday this coming week. So I'm not going to give it away, but special hint, this person's got an amazing book of poetry coming out, and I cannot wait for you to all hear it. It's based on mindfulness self-compassion practices, ones you can share with your staff, your students, your colleagues, your friends, and I can't wait to share that. So, Sarah, you've been a doll to be a part of this conversation with me. It's been an honor. Thanks for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you
Thanks.
all very soon. Go slow,
Thanks.
take care, and be kind.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.